Many fatalities nationwide are associated with alcohol, and if we can find a way to reduce that, we're ultimately saving lives. When you encounter someone who has broken the law, they need to be addressed.
And they help the officer establish probable cause by providing a series of cognitive function, and the field sobriety tests confirm that.
We can use them in the boat, we can make the arrest decision right then and there. That's why it's important.
On behalf of all 56 states, U.S. territories, and the District of Columbia, I'd like to take a few minutes to inform you about a new seated battery of field sobriety tests. It's just a matter of time before you start seeing cases involving these tests, and like you, we would prefer that you had a brief exposure to them so there are no surprises in a hearing or during trial. The seated battery was developed as a result of recent scientific research. U.S. Coast Guard and the National Association of State Boating Law Administrators, or NASBLA, partner to save lives on our nation's waterways by improving officer effectiveness at enforcing the laws against boating under the influence, or BUI. Until recently, marine law enforcement officers had to rely on a series of what we call afloat tests to help establish probable cause for a BUI arrest. Those tests, which in part included a finger dexterity test, counting backward, and reciting the alphabet, have served us well for decades and will continue to be relied upon until we fully transition to the seated battery of tests. Administered in a standardized manner and then evaluated as layperson's observations, study has shown that officers using the afloat tests could reach an arrest, no arrest decision similar to when roadside tests were used. But we have faced some challenges. Some courts still expected to see evidence from the walk and turn and one-leg stand tests in BUI cases, thus leading to issues with suspect transport on the water and finding a suitable testing location. There have been questions about having a suspect perform balance-related tests after being on the water for all or part of the day. Additionally, as people in the U.S. have become increasingly overweight and are living longer, there are more times when the weight placed on walk and turn and one-leg stand evidence may come into question. Recognizing the benefits of developing a seated battery of field sobriety tests which have no dependency on balance or equilibrium, the Coast Guard and NASBLA partnered to have research performed with a goal of scientifically validating a seated battery of field sobriety tests. This 3-year project involved the research team from the Southern California Research Institute, the same organization that has researched sobriety testing in the U.S. for NHTSA and IACP since the 70s. Consistent with previous research, this project involved both laboratory and field research, which ultimately proved validity of this battery of tests during actual on-water BUI investigations. In 2009, the research was completed and the final report was both peer-reviewed and published in at least one scientific journal. Training is now being conducted around the nation to implement the seated battery of tests, with the primary focus on marine law enforcement. The seated battery of tests starts with horizontal gaze nystagmus conducted in the seated position. The next test is finger to nose, which requires the suspect who is seated to tilt the head back to about a 45-degree angle and close the eyes. The suspect is then required to touch the very tip of the index finger to the very tip of the nose using the hand specified by the officer. There are 6 attempts to make the finger-to-nose contact, all done in a systematic order. The next test is the palm pat. In this test, the suspect is to begin with both hands palm to palm, hands and fingers parallel. Then the suspect is to turn the top hand over and count 1 when the hands make contact, then turn the top hand back over and count 2 when the hands make contact. Repeating this, keeping the hands and fingers parallel, and speeding up until told to stop. The suspect performs this within a 10 to 15 second time period. The final test is called hand coordination. It was developed by the researchers just as was the walk and turn test back in the 70s. Like the walk and turn, which requires the suspect to perform tasks like balancing in position while the instructions are given, walking and counting 9 heel-to-toe steps down a line, making a turn in a specified manner, then walking and counting 9 heel-to-toe steps back down the line, this test requires the suspect to perform 4 specific and simple tasks. Starting with the fists against the chest as directed. The first task is to count 1, 2, 3, 4 as the fists are moved in step-like fashion away from the chest. The second task is to memorize the position of the fists, clap 3 times, then return to that memorized position. The third task is to count 5, 6, 7, 8 as the fists are moved in step-like fashion back toward the chest, returning the left fist to the chest. The fourth task is to open the hands and place them palms down in the lap. Each of the seated tests has standardized administrative procedures, clues, and evaluation criteria. By combining all the elements of a BUI investigation with the seated battery of tests, officers will be even more effective at identifying impaired operators, and in most cases will have no need to conduct additional field sobriety tests. We have also found the seated battery to be quite valuable when we deal with DUI suspects who have mobility impairment, are grossly overweight, or have other balance-related problems. Each year in June, we conduct a nationwide BUI education and enforcement initiative called Operation Drywater, and participation has been increasing every year. Many states are beginning to use the new seated battery of tests this year, so the likelihood of encountering a case where they were used in your jurisdiction is increasing. The states, working through NASBLA, are committed to providing you the necessary resources, and we want to provide you access to reports, articles, and contact information for researchers and others who can answer questions or provide insight. I encourage you to visit the NASBLA website at nasbla.org/sobriety test for access to this important information. Thanks for your interest and all you do to help us keep our nation's waterways as safe and enjoyable as possible. We appreciate your support.
These people are personally and professionally motivated to create a better recreational environment for voters across the United States.
So we're going to be working real hard to get officers trained on how to administer and evaluate these field sobriety tests. And that's what our role in the boating safety program really is. It's all about trying to save lives.